Today, we're doing our spring forward video preview of Nebraska's spring football camp, which should start at the end of March here. Today, we're talking about storylines, stories to watch in camp, not necessarily position battles, but just stories that'll be worth following. And we're going to do 5 of them. I'm going to do 3. Evan's going to do 2. And I'm going to start with this one. It's Nebraska's offensive line ready to be really, really good, because I think it's a big, big deal if they are. If Nebraska can run the ball downhill and they can reduce their penalties, reduce their mistakes, both in false starts and holding penalties, then I think they can take a lot of pressure off of the rest of Nebraska's offense. There's issues at wide receiver where they're kind of starting over and they're trying to figure out who the guys are going to be. And then they've got some things to figure out at running back. But at the end of the day, if that offensive line is really good, it alleviates the pressure on all the skill players. So that, to me, is the biggest storyline going into spring. Evan?
One of my biggest storylines, Sam, what does Nebraska have in Logan Sowards? Right now, he's an ankle or a shoulder away from being that guy in a critical 4th year for Scott Frost. And he's been with the program for a little more than a year now, but he had his first spring with the team taken away by the pandemic. He traveled with the team. He was on the headset, but the coaches and program didn't really get a chance to see fully what he can do. Now he has a year settled into the offense, and how he does in the spring will determine what they do going forward with a couple of their open scholarship positions spots still for this cycle. They could go for a quarterback and try to add some depth behind Adrian Martinez, or does he prove that he can be that capable number 2 guy and potential heir apparent here in the next few years? So how he does signals, I think, a lot of what this upcoming season could be about and how that position takes shape in the next few years.
Yes, exactly. The number 2 piece is the key. I think Nebraska's got a pretty good number 3 in Matt Masker if they need to use him. I think he's going to be a pretty good number 3 quarterback. The question is, if Martinez gets hurt at Illinois and they've got to go beat Buffalo, can they do it with Logan Sowards, or do they need to go get a transfer quarterback who then pushes Sowards back to 3? That's the question. You nailed it. My second storyline to watch heading into spring camp is going to be the running back position. I know we're heavy on offense, but at the end of the day, Nebraska's got to get consistency from that position. They've got to be consistent, and they've got to be healthy. Dedrick Mills was a good running back when he was available last year. When he wasn't available last year, Nebraska often defaulted to a guy who is no longer in the program, Wan'Dale Robinson. So if they're not able to get a healthy, consistently injury-free Marquise Stepp, then they have to find one of the 5 freshmen, they're still freshmen, running backs who might be able to help them shore up some of those issues. Those 5 are Ramir Johnson, Marvin Scott, Sevion Morrison, Gabe Irvin, and who am I missing? It might just be 4. Am I missing someone?
Sounds right.
Jaquez Yant.
Oh, okay.
He's a walk-on.
Walk-on from Florida.
Yep. And Cooper Jewett's in there too, Brody Belt, all those guys. But at the end of the day, they've got to find 2 or 3 running backs that they really trust. And Ronald Tompkins, that was the other one. They've got to find guys that they trust. And at the end of the day, they haven't been able to do that yet. And this will be a big spring to see who emerges. Last year, Ronald Tompkins was the number 2 guy. He played in the first game a little bit, barely played the rest of the season. Marvin Scott was the number 2 guy for a while. Then he got a concussion, so on and so forth. So we'll see what they do. Evan.
My next one, Sam. How does this unprecedented depth on the defensive side impact the program? How does that permeate the team this spring? I mean, 5 Nebraska senior starters opted to return with the eligibility freeze. Cam Taylor-Britt put off the NFL for a year. This defense is just loaded with veteran presence, but how does that kind of flow down to everybody else? How does that make a young, unproven offense better on a day-by-day, week-by-week sort of basis? How do those established voices in the room, like a Cam Taylor-Britt, like a Deontay Williams, how does that lead, to some sort of leadership with the team this year in a group that oftentimes maybe didn't have the vocal leaders over the years that it would have needed in tough situations? How does their presence help bring along some of the younger guys that we've talked about, like a Miles Farmer, a Quentin Newsome, a Noah Pola-Gates, guys who are now not thrust into a prominent position right away, but have the luxury of kind of easing into things and learning from older guys? So just how that situation where Nebraska has more sixth-year college football players on that side of the ball than it probably ever has before, how that benefits the team is of interest to me this spring.
That's a heck of a good point. The last storyline for spring camp is special teams, specials. Who runs it, for one thing? They haven't really hired anybody to do it. So is it Bill Bush, who is a defensive analyst? Is it Mike Dawson, who is a defensive assistant coach? Is it some other analyst on the team? It doesn't look like they have a special team specific guy to do that. Part of being good in special teams is having good specialists, and they weren't great last year. The punting was so, and the kickoff work was not good enough. It just wasn't good enough. And then they were poor on kickoff return too. That was a unit that was almost giving up yards, hurting itself by returning kickoffs, to the 22, which, is like a 3-yard penalty. So there's a number of issues that they had on the special teams. It's not clear that they're going to resolve all those in the spring, but it would be interesting to see Daniel Cherney as a punter. If Cherney is the real deal there, that's one problem that they get to solve. The kickoff thing, that could still be an issue. So we'll see who runs it, and then how well they do in terms of handling the specialist battles in camp. All right, well that's our five storylines for Nebraska spring camp. For Evan Bland, I'm Sam McKewon with the Omaha World-Herald, Big Red Today, and Omaha.com. Thanks.